Welcome to Coffee with Jenny B. It's about conversations, community, and connections. It's about what brings me joy and everything in between. I love Winnipeg. I was born here, grew up here, and enjoyed everything about my life in Winnipeg. And what I love about Winnipeg is that technically it is a city and the capital of Manitoba, but in a lot of ways, Winnipeg is like a small town. You have the small town feelings of neighborhoods, community, connecting with each other, and really embracing the life in Winnipeg. There's a movie called 6 Degrees of Separation, and the idea is that for every sixth person you meet, there is a connection. But for me, I feel that in Winnipeg, it's more like 2 degrees of separation, because it doesn't matter who you bump into, 5 minutes into your conversation and you have someone in common. And that is really what community and connections are all about. Now, speaking of community and connections, my guest today is someone who has created his own community and, of course, connecting through various means such as podcast and his marketing company. I'd like to welcome Stephen Maxted to our program. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for having me on in that intro. Hopefully I do justice to that intro.
Oh, absolutely, you will.
So, yes.
A is such a Canadian word, phrase, thing. When you travel anywhere in the world, and if someone says A, right away, oh, you must be from Canada. So Ehpodcast and A marketing company, what made you decide to go with that concept?
Yeah, and I think it kind of takes a step back to one of the first companies I started a few years ago, a little bit more seriously, was called Type Eh Bikes, EH. And with the naming of that one, I was really struggling to find the right fit for how it felt with what we were trying to create then. And ultimately it was based off of personality type being type A, but that wasn't really strong enough. And then there was also the Canadian play. So then adjusted that name and made that name be type EH. And from that company, which is now a brand called Type A that we sell across Canada, has a pretty strong following that way. When it came time to make and head down the direction of the marketing company, that's where we felt the calling was going, and now we have a team built out there. It was I'll call it almost kind of like simplicity in a way. I knew that A was a strong branding that we'd already kind of created, so people would follow that with our new stuff that we were doing. So it was pretty easy and straightforward to understand if we had a company, A marketing company, and then Ehpodcast Canada, in terms of that branding around EH there. So it was kind of progression of things, and it wasn't one decision over another. It was almost simplicity in a way to stick with that as far as a brand for story following. And sometimes it gets a little convoluted at times because they are very similar, but there's kind of two different entities there. And then it seems to have a bit of a following now for what we're doing, and involving other folks like yourself on our podcast and sharing stories is exactly what we like to do, and sharing that authentic story out from mostly Winnipeggers on our podcast, but we do reach a little outside that now, which I think is great too.
It is. So. And I love how you mentioned that it's more inclusive in terms of Canada, but also in Winnipeg. And one thing that I've noticed for a lot of businesses is that even though they're based in Winnipeg, they tend to branch out a little bit, and it's not so much that they want to sell to other parts of Canada, which of course is not a bad idea, but what it does is it really brings the spotlight into Winnipeg. So for instance, one of my friends, Leonard Taylor, does gorgeous designs, and so he travels everywhere, but because he is a Winnipegger with his design studio here, it's really emphasizing Winnipeg may seem like, like a hidden gem in a sense, that people are like, oh, Winnipeg, aren't you somewhere in Canada? But no, it's really embracing the fact that there's a lot of wonderful things that are coming out of Winnipeg. And so with your podcast, now I know you talked about, you interview Winnipeggers and others, but when it comes to your podcast, what would you say is your biggest satisfaction from doing that podcast?
Okay, that's a good question. And for a couple of reasons, because when we also started the podcast, to take a step back, it was mostly to figure out how to create podcasts. It didn't have as much of a direction initially, if I'm being very transparent about that. It was, let's make 9 episodes, and brought in a couple of folks to my team to help with editing and production on the marketing side, because I saw such great potential in creating content in conversation, just like we're doing today. And through that, as we were expanding, and it started people were asking to then come on to the podcast and gain a little bit more traction, although it takes time to do that no matter what you're producing. I think one of the biggest points of satisfaction, to answer your question, is getting feedback from both folks that have been on there, who have had people reach out to them and contact them from being on the podcast. And so kind of our whole motive behind producing this podcast is to help folks get the word out there, because although it is a great local community here, some companies do need to reach outside the city for what their business is doing, and connecting with folks in other areas to either sell a product or service. And so getting that feedback initially, and just one example that comes to mind, was fantastic. But now it's happened multiple times, and then the more that we can connect with other people outside of our local community here in Winnipeg, and bring them to know that Winnipeg's on the map.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way too, because a lot of those other folks that we do connect with, someone I was chatting with earlier today has a quite extensive following on some of their social media platforms. And it's interesting to understand what drives their business in their area, and even sharing the story of kind of what Winnipeg's about before and after the podcast. There's a lot of other conversations that are happening, not just what's on film, but that connection that we make before and after, and we get talking about things like Winnipeg and how there is like 2 degrees of separation,
right?
And there's satisfaction there about sharing our story of the Winnipeg and the Manitoba story of things that we have going on here, and then it becomes easy to connect people too. If someone on the podcast after or before needs someone that does such and such, and I know someone that does that, or they were on the podcast, it's easy to be the glue in that conversation and connect people. So that part has ultimately been the most rewarding, and a really strong reason to continue production. So
absolutely. And I agree about connections, because the more you connect, and not just connecting you with what you're doing, but also connecting others together. And I like the way that you use the word glue, in terms of you're gluing things together and making it work. Now, we talked about your podcast, which of course I love listening. I love watching all your snippets that you put on Instagram.
Thank you. Sometimes it can be a lot.
No, you know what? There's no such thing as too much, especially when you're doing something like that, because it's entertaining. And it's not like you're putting the entire episode on Instagram. You're doing like little snippets.
Yeah.
And it's enough to intrigue someone to say, hey, I really like that, so I'm going to go check your website and then listen to the podcast. Now, what about your marketing company? So, of course, you're helping people create their own podcasts, but also, what are you doing in terms of the marketing aspect?
Yeah, so it kind of almost goes hand in hand, or there is some overlap there in some ways, but ultimately helping companies and individuals with their marketing needs, whether it be a company that is growing and needs someone to fill the position of marketing, but they're not quite ready to commit to a full-time person, because it really does require a full team from my perspective to run a successful marketing team. And if you can't bring that in-house with one person, because you are asking a lot of that individual, then hire someone like myself, or there's a lot of great marketing companies locally here that, find the right energy that matches your company too is my biggest thing. We're not a fit for everyone. And I would say probably the same for other companies in terms of that. Just spread the love around here. There's other great marketing companies locally and around the world. And just, I would say other businesses or individuals, find the right help. Or, we've had the case of a couple companies, unfortunately, and going through some changes where they've had to scale down and they still need that position filled. And we're kind of at a good, price point within the services that we provide that they're still able to have someone on the marketing team and know that they have support in that way, even though they've taken maybe a change in direction or path through a little bit of a hardship. So we've had both examples and helped other folks start podcasts. And I think there's some major help to be done there. Ultimately, the motive and our mission is to help other companies get exposure and grow their brand to a point where maybe they don't need us or they grow into their own marketing internal team one day. That's truly how we look at this thing, is helping people get their messaging out. There's tons of great examples in the tech community locally here and other networking events that I've attended where there's just such a fantastic idea, but just not the right, social, I guess getting it out there on social media is that what I'm trying to say here is like getting their wording out as they struggle to do so. But there's getting that message, out of such intelligent brains is sometimes the biggest hurdle that these companies face. They have the best product on the market or service, but them sharing that story in a way that communicates to a bigger audience is ultimately the biggest hurdle for them. I've seen that a few times with folks who worked with. So, yeah.
You mentioned tech and the tech community. I know that you've been really involved with Tech Thursdays, and I've been to a few of them myself, and so I really find it very interesting because as a non-techie, I mean, I know enough to get around, enough not to be dangerous, but when it comes to the tech, you want to leave it to the experts. And so how did you get involved with Tech Thursday?
Yeah, there's kind of a few parties to mention. There's a few organizations kind of all helping make that thing. There's like the Tech Thursday, Manitoba Tech Accelerator, North Forge, and a bunch of sponsors within that community. So if I missed anyone, apologies. But there's a few folks really helping drive that thing forward. And I just happen to be one of the people, I think, early on that helped kind of gather around the Thursday. There was actually a small group of us that came back from an event out in Saskatchewan, Uniting the Prairies, and they had this like TNT and Tech Thursday event going on there where it was basically get together in a casual setting and, there might be a presenter that night or not, and just getting together and, bringing together of the minds. And there's a few areas that you can go do that, whether it be different lunch groups, like BNI, or, if your business is doing a little better with like EO Canada, there's a chapter in Winnipeg here and such. But back to the Thursday event that is hosted, it's a great, now there's a panel discussion almost every week there with experts in different fields. So you can go and hear about different topics that are being presented and discussed up there. And then within the space, again, it's almost like the podcast before and after the presentation itself is really where the mingling happens and the sharing of the minds. I jokingly call it like startup therapy for those Thursday discussions where you get to just go chat with other folks in the business space and, share things that are on your mind. And there's lots of good discussion, and just to know that you're not alone on the journey. Because a lot of time when you're starting a company, it's not in a partnership. If you're lucky enough to have a solid partnership, great. And then you have someone to talk with, through decision making. But a lot of the time there's, solo leaders or people building on teams and other things to be managed. And there's a really strong community that we have locally here in Winnipeg, and it's just seems to be exponentially growing in terms of support, attendance, and even the style of conversations that we have nowadays. So.
And I love that it's free.
Yes.
So just show up and, and listen to the panel, you can ask questions. And then, as you say, the mingling and actually the magic in a sense, because then you get a chance to actually speak to experts and, get their opinion. And would you say that people that are on the panel, or most of the people that attend Tech Thursday, are local, or do you get people coming into Winnipeg?
Their question, and we were just at one, and they're free to attend. Most of the time they're at the King's Head pub, just for reference on here, and sometimes they're at the Bridge, which is a extension of MTA. So it kind of changes sometimes, but in case someone hears this and wants to find it and goes to the wrong spot, but double check on the calendar or contact one of us. I mean, everyone's very welcoming in that community. And most of the time it is folks locally here. I know recently we had some folks more on even like the political side attend and start to speak about their involvement in helping the business community that way. But I was just at one maybe 3 weeks ago, and it was someone who was actually originally from Winnipeg.
Okay.
But they were out in Calgary. They're part of a VC firm out there, and interestingly enough, drawing back to Winnipeg and coming back with that expertise, it definitely is that 2 degrees of separation through conversation with that individual. They were from the farming community, and I come from an agriculture background professionally before taking the jump, and immediately there was connections there. So, and there is folks, so kind of coming in from other parts of Canada. I don't know if we've had anyone from the States. I'm sure that we have, and I'm missing them on that one. But so it is kind of local and a blend of bringing in some experts from other areas for those events.
And, it's nice to bring people from outside of Winnipeg because, again, it's showcasing Winnipeg as, we're not just the middle of Canada. That we have a lot going on for us. And not just tech and I mentioned Leonard Taylor, of course, but I know that some of our restaurants have been featured, in magazines, top 10. And so there's a lot to be, I guess, not grateful for, but grateful that Winnipeg, can show themselves off as the city that, welcomes everyone. And I know that even people that are sort of expats that live outside of Winnipeg still talk about Winnipeg, and there's things that are so quintessential to Winnipeg that you can't get anywhere else. Yep. And they always say, you know what, if you're coming to visit me, you need to bring this and this and this because they can't get it anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few, the funnies that keep us on the map, like the honey dill sauce and some other things like that. But I think there is a really great sense of community here. And it's nice because it's not so far of a reach in the local business community to kind of get in touch with someone who is at that next level of business and on their journey. Versus I don't know that to be true necessarily in other larger cities, not to name them in any which way as being negative, but just bigger city centers, it's more of a struggle to kind of be able to knock on that door, pick up that phone, and here it's a very, quick set of string, conversations to get there. And coming to something like Tech Thursday, if you do have a question about business or tech and startup community would be a great way to, get in contact with the right person and find out hopefully the answer to what you're looking for.
Absolutely, yes. Now, getting back to your company, and you mentioned brand, is such I just want to say it's such a cheeky kind of a way of working on a brand. Yes. But at the same time, when you think about branding, when you think about exposure, when you think about wanting to promote your company, why not go with something that is, off the charts or off the wall or something a little different, because it catches people by surprise, doesn't it? And so what has been the feedback from others about your company and the name of your company?
It's okay. So, because there was kind of the punny thought around just being able to say like, oh, I run a podcast, and then people be like, well, what is it? Or a marketing company. So there was that thought, but it's really only happened once where someone was like, oh, well, what's it called? Every other time people have already caught on to the fact that it's EH, and I was being silly with that a little bit. But like I said, it kind of came from a place of almost lack of creativity to branch out and name it something different. Tied to maybe like a name or a family name may have been easier in some ways, but the A thing is seemed to be go okay. So we'll see where it goes down the road. I mean, I think sometimes different growth or trajectories of companies may look back and wish that they would have named it something different, like down the road as things evolve for them. But I'm pretty happy with how it's going. And, it's whatever the company is called, like we talk a lot about with folks that we work with on the marketing side. I mean, name is very important. Brand is incredibly important nowadays, more than ever, exactly what we're, on here chatting about today. Yeah. But you still have to show up and do the work and provide the service. So regardless of what your company is called, if you're good enough, you will, work your way through. If you do need to make an adjustment, you named it something silly, and, that's something you're going to have to face down the road perhaps. But I often think about that even from the perspective of supporting locally the best that, you can for, we'll say like no cost. And one of the best things to do, in my opinion, is writing and leaving Google reviews. And hopefully they're positive. My personal take is if it's so negative, either just don't leave one or call them and tell them what that is, what's going on. Just, I don't think that's good energy to have out there. But I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for folks to help enhance our local businesses in that way and leave reviews and let people know, what the positives were of that experience. I think that that's almost a way oversight thing that we would kind of forget about. Sometimes we do when we travel. You go to a nice place, you're like, oh, I should leave them a Google review. But you should leave it for everywhere you go. Yeah.
If you can. Well, especially if it's a positive one. If it's a negative, maybe just don't bother.
Yeah, that's my take on it as a business. I've seen reviews working with other folks, and some, sometimes people are having a bad day on both sides of the fence on that one. So that's just my take. But I think that's something that's just a little tangent of advice about, there's always something that you can do, whether it be liking posts online from your local companies, like no problem to open up the the everyday email from Amazon or Costco that you get. Do it for your local company too. See what they're saying, or follow them and subscribe to whatever channels they have. It is a huge help. It definitely does help and impact those local companies. I think everyone collectively would be on board with that when I say that for the whole business community in Winnipeg. Like the more feedback, the better, frankly. And you know what? Even if it is bad, you learn from that. If it is genuinely you're doing something that maybe the feedback, if it is negative like that, sometimes comes with passion of wanting it to be better almost in a way. So I should maybe retract that and say it's not always the worst case. If you do get a bad one, it may help sharpen your saw, so to say.
Maybe.
Being better.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't know that you're doing something wrong or that you missed somebody or, somebody had a bad experience. And so when you're getting that feedback, it really does help, as you say, kind of sharpen things. Yeah. And I'm totally about local as well. I mean, of course, I'm a Starbucks gal and I love my Starbucks coffee. I used to be a barista actually a long time ago. But I love supporting local, local coffee shops because they can really use the love and I mean, you're getting something that is fresh. You're getting freshly roasted beans. You're getting coffee that, was just roasted that day. And so supporting local and really showing Winnipeg communities the love and the businesses that they need because that helps them grow. And I know that we've, unfortunately had a number of businesses close for a variety of reasons. But if we can really get out there and support them and show them that, yes, we believe in you. We want you to be here because you're an important part of our community.
Yeah. No, I second that thought, the whole thing. That's great. No, I mean, as much as you can, between like my take, I love trying new food places. A great example of that and follow up with leaving that review and making sure I'm following them on their social media journey. If they do have that, it's not needed for every company either. So, but I think it is very important to show that because and I like everyone on there, most of the time, even for the Google reviews, that goes right to the business owner. That's kind of why I like doing that as well. It's a good instant feedback to them. It goes right up to the top. And, whether it be, just making sure you're taking that, being conscious about where the money's going. Because it definitely, people are noticing those bottom lines locally here versus sometimes when it's, a bigger company, everyone might be pushing a little bit harder and noticing that loss. But sometimes it's, you're impacting someone's daily income right locally here. So
yeah, and I know that Winnipeg is known as probably one of the most generous cities in Winnipeg. I used to work in fundraising, and Winnipeggers are so generous when it comes to supporting nonprofits and causes that they believe in. But also I know Winnipeggers really rise to the occasion when it comes to supporting local initiatives and restaurants and businesses. And so if they can continue really doing that, then, I mean, it's really going to make a huge impact on everyone.
Absolutely. And it has to be a part of your, I would say, business strategy locally. But regardless of that, I think it is really important as a business owner to do that. And I think many, if not all, business owners do participate in giving back, whether it be with their time and understanding what is needed in the community, maybe perhaps a little bit more because they're looking at budgets and understanding that there is the need for efforts in different areas. So I think that is definitely a key to success.
So what's next for you?
Shoot, that's a big one. I think for us, a couple things that we're going to continue to grow the brand and some of our, actually give back this month is a bigger one for us. We have a couple booth setups and one of our kind of donation partners with Type Eh, the brand now is Canadian Blood Services. We worked with them for a couple years now, and part of that was punny too.
Oh yeah, Type Eh.
It was just really fun. I figured that was a good fit and impacts a lot of folks and something you can do with no cost as well if you are able to. And also we are, spending some time raising funds for breast cancer later this month as well with that one. So kind of a direction there, both growing a brand in terms of merch, and we'll see where that goes with us on that part of the business. And then the marketing and podcast side, I'd say, the more folks that we can help grow businesses, we're looking at different avenues there for online webinars coming up about how to reach, more people, both locally and just for time efficiency. I love nothing more than getting together on like a Thursday or even hosting events, but the reality is we've kind of become more comfortable with maybe doing the virtual thing.
Yeah.
There definitely is, it's not the same in person. You can never replace, the reading of body language, understanding tone, different things like that.
Energy and all that, yeah.
Versus on screen. So we don't want to kind of decrease that in what we're trying to reach more folks. But at the same time, we can't be there for everyone's company to help them on the marketing side. And as far as the podcast goes, we're on a pretty strong trajectory now for engagement. And as it stands right now, I think season 3 for us, which we'll come into in 2025, will look a little different, but the same. With that, a little bit of a teaser there, I guess. But just sharpening our own tool set with the team, and we've recently brought on some more people onto the team to help take us to the next level in terms of production and even location and what we're going to be looking like for filming. And so with that being said, I mean, hopefully ultimately we can help get the word out about great people doing great things. The focus for us is small, medium businesses and high performing individuals on the athletic side. It's genuinely things that interest me personally. We tried to have it concrete initially and be mostly business, but it's kind of right now a mix of things. So, yeah.
Sounds wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on and sharing more about your involvement with the community in Winnipeg and, of course, telling us a little bit more about your podcast and your marketing company. And then, of course, Tech Thursday. There's a lot that you're involved in. So you're sort of a little bit of in everything when it comes to Winnipeg community and events.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. I do try hard to be out there and be involved because I care. And thank you so much for making time to be on here today. It's been great chatting with you, and thanks for the coffee.
You're welcome. All right, my pleasure. So thank you to Stephen for coming on and joining us and talking about Winnipeg and community and connections. This is Coffee with Jenny B. Conversations, connecting, and community on the Multicultural channel. I'm your host, Jenny Sakovac.